In a world where most people watch movies and then forget about them, these brave heroes join forces to watch them again and then talk about them. Join them in their epic journey as they go back in time, a decade and beyond, to revisit and break down films from a vast array of genres. Do these movies hold up over time? Are they classics? Find out on Retro Movie Roundtable. Starring your hosts, Bryan Frye, Chad Robinson, Dustin Melbardis, Nathan Lutz, and Russell Guest. Coming now to headphones in your ears.
Welcome all you lords, ladies, and knights of the Retro Movie Roundtable, where we watch movies and then talk about them. I'm your host, Nathan Lutz, and joining me today is my good friend and co-host, Bryan Frye. How are you, Bryan?
I'm doing well, guys. Cheers, everybody. Hope you're happy you're listening.
Glad to hear that. And also with me today, and someone that you have heard before on a previous episode, but is now joining us officially as a host, I will introduce Dustin Melbardis. How are you, Dustin?
Hey there. I'm excited to be part of the team, part of the round table, ready for the first assignment.
All right. Well, let's move into this. Tell us a little about yourself, Dustin.
Well, I'm 33 years old. I've got a mohawk and a mustache. I love living in Central Texas, and I love talking about sci-fi movies.
All right. Well, that sounds like you've found a good place to be, and also much warmer than where I am right now. Yeah. So, what is the last movie you saw?
The last movie I saw was the terrific Blade Runner, but before that, I actually rewatched The Prestige for the 30th time or so. One of my favorites.
All hail Christopher Nolan and all of his glory.
All hail, stand up.
I know that we are really excited to get into this movie that we will be looking at today. That is Blade Runner. And we will be taking a look at it in just a moment. So if you haven't seen this movie, there will be spoilers ahead. So right after these messages, we will be starting a recap.
Welcome to the Flashback Flicks Retro Movie Podcast. I'm Ricky.
I'm Grayson.
And every week we review a movie from the past and reflect on things we missed, things we loved, and things we want to see again.
Yeah, because we believe any movie worth watching is worth watching again.
So if you like films, friendship, and a lot of callbacks,
I mean, just so many callbacks,
then subscribe on Apple Podcasts, YouTube, or wherever RSS feeds go for like-minded movie-loving individuals. Like you.
Well, I know we're coming back from break, but did you ever say what your last movie was, Nathan?
Well, the last movie that I watched personally was actually the sequel, the follow-up to this movie, Blade Runner 2049. And it is, I gotta say, one of the rare examples of a movie that takes a cult classic, an old cult classic movie that people love, and brings it back and adds a lot to it. And it's something that, after watching this movie, I really recommend that as a follow-up. It is deeply respectful to the source material and adds some awesome themes on top of it. But today we're going to be talking about the original 1982's Blade Runner, the respected science fiction classic based on Philip K. Dick's 1962 novel Do Androids Dream of Electric Sheep, starring Harrison Ford, Rutger Hauer, Sean Young, Edward James Olmos, released in 1982, and grossing $27 million, with the placement of 29 in the box office that year. Ahead of it was the movie Victor Victoria at number 28, and at 30 was Fast Times at Ridgemont High. The number one movie that year was E.T., the Extraterrestrial.
Never heard of it.
Another fantastic science fiction classic that, it's a lot more mainstream, so, by just another small name director. The IMDb rating for this movie was 8.1. Of course, on Rotten Tomatoes, the tomato meter has a 90% and the audience score is 91%, so big agreement there. for awards, this movie won plenty of awards. It won at the Academy Awards Best Art Direction and Best Visual Effects. It has the Golden Globes Awards nominee for Best Original Score. It won 3 BAFTAs, had 5 BAFTAs nominated, and 4 Saturn Awards. On the AFI Top 100 Movies list, last updated, is at 97, and among the top science fiction movies, it is number 6. And on the top thrills list, it is number 74. So this movie is very, very well supported and loved by its audiences. So, Brian and Dustin first, have you seen this movie before? What were you expecting?
I got a weird answer here. I watched this movie for the first time when I was in middle school. My dad, who rules, decided just to show me, Pink Floyd The Wall, Reservoir Dogs, Pulp Fiction, Total Recall, and Blade Runner. He said, you know what, son, you need to watch these movies, not caring if I was mature or not.
Well, that explains a lot, as you are such a big ideas guy. All these amazing science fiction and dystopian movies that just have so many big, important ideas in them that
Oh yeah,
put your
movies that
mind
make
thinking.
you feel really good, like Pink Floyd
Brian,
The
how
Wall
about you?
or Reservoir Dogs.
Or-
Real feel good movie. Yeah.
Yeah.
I
Brian, how
actually
about
just
you?
I just had an epiphany over here. For years, I've been trying to figure out how to explain to Russ how it is I can watch war movies over and over again. Saving Private Ryan, We Were Soldiers, Black Hawk Down. Like, those are movies I'll just toss on, to have on. And he's like, "Oh, these are crazy, depressing movies. Like, how can you just rewatch stuff like that?" And this is it. He grew up on those movies. I can't tell you how many times I watched Gettysburg as a kid. Like, my dad would watch. This is it. This is why I was either watching the History Channel, Apocalypse
Platoon.
Now, Gettysburg, Platoon. Yeah, this is it. This is the reason. And I never put that together until right now. So, Russ, here's your answer. This is the reason I can watch those movies over and over again, is because it's what I grew up on.
Makes so much sense now.
Now, I will tell you this. I do not remember the first time I watched Blade Runner, but I will tell you this. And I hate it when people ask me, "Hey, what's your favorite book? What's your favorite movie? What's your favorite CD?" Because that's such a, or album. That's such a loaded question. I mean, it depends on mood and whatever. But if you put my feet to hot coals and demanded an answer to this, Blade Runner is probably my favorite movie of all time. And I've watched this movie I don't know how many times. I've got the multitude of varying editions that have come out over time. I even came so close to buying the Blu-ray edition that came with the little police squad car just to get the squad car. I already had the Blu-ray. I already had it digitally. I had no reason to buy it other than that little squad car. And I was like, maybe I need
It's
that.
tempting.
I've got the book. Anyway, I dig this movie. It's great. I can't wait to get into it.
Well, Dustin, as someone who was very young and watching The Matrix as
Love
my
The
introduction
Matrix.
movie for
Love
that
The
way,
Matrix.
I can definitely understand the feeling of growing up with movies that have big ideas about what the future in society is. Because,
Yeah, it's
man,
weird.
A movie like this, if you watch this when you're that age, it's gotta implant some thoughts. But for me, this was actually something that I only first watched it a couple of years ago when I was actually just coming right out of college, and had it recommended right as Blade Runner 2049 was about to come out. And so for me, those two movies are very interlinked, that I actually watched this movie almost as a preparatory thing to then go watch Blade Runner 2049 with Russell Guest and a bunch of other people from the office that we both work at. So it was kind of a cool experience to see those two things together.
Oh.
And boy, does it hold up
Yeah,
well.
you're talking about like seeing the movie as an adult, someone who has
As an
matured
adult, yes.
and figured out how the world works.
As we are all really excited to get into this movie, I'm just going to give a spoiler warning before we can move on any further. We will be having a full recap and summary, so if you haven't gone to see this movie before, it is such a great movie. I can't recommend it highly enough. Go watch it, then come back, listen through these messages that are right up ahead, and we will get right into this review.
What happens when two modern film fans go back and rewatch all the old classic films from yesteryear to see if they hold up? You get the Classic Film Jerks podcast. Find the Classic Film Jerks podcast on all the major platforms.
Thank you, Classic Film Jerks. That was so old-timey, but now let's go ahead and get into the recap with Bryan Frye. That was bad. Go ahead.
In the future, replicants, machines created to do man's dirty work off-planet, have started to rebel. They are outlawed on Earth, and special detectives called Blade Runners are trained to retire, or kill, any on planet. Deckard, a retired in a totally different way, is the best Blade Runner still breathing, and is pulled back into the fray to locate 4 skin jobs, as they are derogatorily called. He applies his trade and finds a 5th replicant in a beautiful young woman working at the Tyrell Corporation, the same corporation that creates the replicants themselves. A spark of interest exists between Deckard and the replicant Rachel. As Deckard struggles with his job and his feelings for Rachel, she herself struggles with what she is. Eventually, Deckard retires 2 of the Renegade replicants and succumbs to his feelings for Rachel. All the while, Roy, the combat model and leader of the Renegade replicants, hunts for his creator, Tyrell himself. Eventually, having the pleasure model, Triss, track down one of his peers in J.F. Sebastian. Once Roy and Triss convince Sebastian to help arrange a meeting with Tyrell, they do not get the answers they're looking for and kill him. Deckard tracks down JF while Roy is away and kills Triss. Roy arrives and fights Deckard until inexplicably saving his life before his lifeline expires. Deckard, knowing Rachel is in danger from being retired too, races home to find her well, but with a subtle message. The movie closes as they both go on the run.
Great summary, Brian. This is a very complicated movie plot. It's something that, for me, reminds me of watching a series of TV episodes in a way, where there are big portions of the movie that flow as very much a detective story, where you're shown things not explained clearly until you find them out later in different, very episodic stages of how this develops.
Isn't this... I'm new at this, guys. Isn't this where we're going to go over the cast and then we start getting into it?
We have Harrison Ford starring as Rick Deckard. We have Rutger Hauer as Roy Batty, the replicant leader. We have Sean Young as Rachel, the love interest. We have Edward James Olmos as Gaff. Emmett Walsh as Bryant, Daryl Hannah as Priss, William Sanderson as J.F. Sebastian, Brian James as Leon Kowalski, and Joe Turkel as Dr. Eldon Tyrell.
All important, all doing their jobs in the movie so well that it's difficult to pull out who's starring, who's featured, and when they're featured, they are stealing the scene in almost every scene. You have, for instance, I was not familiar with the actress Sean Young aside from this movie, but aside from the bizarre 1950s hairstyle and the best wardrobe in the entire movie, and also her character having the name spelled Rachel in the worst way. Why do you need that extra A? We don't need it. But aside from that, like, she steals the scene, and it's almost as if there's too much star power, and it's not ego star power. It's just like everybody is taking your attention away every time because you want to learn more about these characters every single time you see them.
I guarantee you've seen her in at least one more thing.
Okay, well, what is it? Maybe I haven't seen it.
Finkel is Einhorn. Einhorn is Finkel. Ace Ventura.
Okay, then yes, I have seen it. I have seen it before.
It's kind of a wild thing with her too, because obviously her is Rachel in this, but I was telling somebody earlier today that we were going to be doing this podcast, and the thing that connects this movie with what is likely my favorite book of all time, which is Frank Herbert's Dune, is she actually plays the female lead in Cheney in 1984's the Lynch Dune. So she's literally been in two of the most influential fictional tales of for me, and that's without it's basically by mistake. I'm not saying it's a mistake to cast her in both. I'm just saying that it happy coincidence might be the better way to say it, that she actually connects what is my favorite movie with what is my favorite book.
That is really awesome. That's a very different movie. And I will say, regarding the name spelling, it's biblical, and the point is that it's biblical, and that's related to 2049, not this movie really so much. No spoilers for that movie, but it's important.
Imagine saying something innocuous and then just being completely dunked on by Nathan.
It was an observation, because as part of watching, getting ready for this podcast, rewatching Blade Runner, I also rewatched Blade Runner 2049, and that name came up in that movie, being brought up by a character in that direct sense, and I just went, "Oh my gosh, was this planned? That's
all I
amazing!"
know is I'm just in the poster of getting dunked on by you with having the 2049 knowledge. But hey, a fine name. Rachel's a fine name.
I am basking in the glow of having watched two movies with fantastic soundtracks. Aside from the main cast, this film was created by director Ridley Scott, who is famous for, of course, the Alien franchise, as well as 1977's The Duelists, 1985 Legend, and various other movies that are just incredibly well known. G.I. Jane, Gladiator, Black Hawk Down, Prometheus, The Martian, just so many great movies by this director, and you can just see the artistry in everything that's in here, both by the director and by the incredible art design and production, which was done by, and I wrote this down somewhere because I will not, for a movie like this, leave that out because they need to be recognized, but I put it in a bad place in the outline, blah blah, where was I? This with production designer Lawrence G. Paul and art director David Snyder. Just really amazing effects work and art in everything in this movie.
When you say everything in this movie, and it's hard to ever talk before Brian here, which this is his favorite movie, but I was enthralled by watching it. I was under its spell both times. As I said, I was trying to take notes to talk about stuff, and all I could do was watch. And then I switched it over to watching it on my tablet instead of on my TV. And I still was holding the tablet in front of my face. It just captures you in a way that I wasn't expecting.
You just want to say, enhance,
yeah,
every
track
little detail.
45, stop. Center, stop. Yeah, you do want to do that.
Jeez.
What do you start with, man?
Well, there are a couple things here. As far as visual effects go, you could go forward in time 20 years, and I am still more entranced by the segue scenes of the world they are living in. They did a better job of the city in this than they did of Coruscant in all of the prequel Star Wars movies. Like the sense of scale, it was all at once a sense of desolation, and I don't mean desolation in an empty way, like so much of something that there's nothing left. And that was really the idea behind Coruscant being a city planet in Star Wars. So I just felt like how they filmed this, how they showed, and it was minimalist for the most part. Like they didn't go with grandiose backdrops. They went with a very epic, the Vangelis doing the music behind, showing something as simple as a hover car flying to a police station or to the Tyrell Corporation, gave you this sense of grandeur. And I'll tell you, other movies have tried to do it, like Highlander 2, took a giant dump all over that idea with the whole, like, atmosphere shield. And I felt like that was a straight, carbon copy, cut and paste. We're going to try to do a Blade Runner, and they failed. So I feel like movies in the future failed at doing what Blade Runner did, and Blade Runner still holds up.
This is a movie that, interestingly, in researching it, Philip K. Dick, author of Do Androids Dream of Electric Sheep, on which this movie is based, was not such a fan of a lot of the earlier drafts of the screenplays, and quite late in his life was very resistant to this movie going forward, as it was based on what he'd seen. But the effects company showed him a cut of all of the pure effects scenes of all the city and the way things were working, and apparently this alone, without seeing anything else about the movie, totally sold Philip K. Dick on allowing this movie to go forward in that way. That he said, this is exactly what I was imagining in my head. This is an amazing representation of the world that I was picturing. And the thing that I want to call attention to is just the fact it feels like a world in a way that a lot of other movies just don't quite capture. It's not merely an idea of some cityscape or something. Every detail has been worked out to work with everything else in a way that feels like not everyone is doing the same thing. There are so many different scenes with completely different environments, so you never feel like, oh, every place is like everywhere else, and you have these giant buildings that have a very dominating feel, but then it goes all the way down to the tiny scale of various street scenes. So it's cool stuff.
I'm completely with you. I am completely with you here. You have these pseudo pyramids where the corporations and the rich people live, and you also have people live in abandoned hotels because there's space. Because if you could, you would have left to go off-world. And I didn't realize until my second rewatch that there's Hare Krishnas walking around the streets. You have gangs of people dressed like Ash from Pokemon.
Yeah.
It doesn't make sense. And the crowding the street because the crosswalks don't even work. The walk and don't walk are flashing at the same time. You've got bicycle gangs wearing rice paddy hats. You've got buses full of old people like heading to cribbage. There's all types of people here. Think of the bar where he meets the connection for the snake woman, and it's filled with like debutantes. It's like a masquerade. There's all sorts of levels of people here, and you can feel like this place exists.
I think one of the things that really gets me about it too is, being someone like this movie came out 2 years before I was born. So, I'm not gonna, plant any flags or stake any claims on this being a generational film for me. But I did grow up with everything that tried to take, and I don't mean this in a negative way, tried to take something from this movie to enrich their own. So you have Judge Dredd, you have Fifth Element. Like, there are so many movies that borrowed pieces of this, of what made this such an experience, and tried to use those pieces to enrich their own films. And I think that's why I understand the initial critic, the initial reviews of this weren't all that great, but like something or like an artist that wasn't truly appreciated in its time, it didn't take too long before people were like, wait a second, this is awesome. And it's also irritating, but also part of the history of this film that there have been so many cuts of this to say, okay, this is this person's vision. This was released for this reason. And in the end, if you get it all together, you're like, gosh, what a story.
And sometimes you're not even sure what story is being told.
There are wonderful reasons that this is the movie that everybody compares back to whenever someone does a science fiction cityscape.
Science cityscape. There was attention paid by Ridley Scott. What's his name?
Ridley Scott.
Oh, that's
Ridley?
There was attention paid by Ridley Scott.
The Riddler Scott.
Riddler Scott. Ridley Scott. Pay attention.
Now that is a very different movie.
When he's shooting these, we're 50 floors up and you see this thing. The incredible advertisement blimp, or like the cell product Zeppelin come through. That this place is deep for its height, not deep underground. Just it's deep with so much stuff, and you would almost wish that. I know you mentioned it being episodic. You'd almost wish that, like, what are the other tales of this place? Do we even know if this place has a name? Particular city? I'll turn to Brian on that one.
I think I always assumed it was in L.A., just based on the West Coast nature of it, and then later on in 2049.
Unfortunately, I am the one without the 2049 knowledge. I'm still back in the 80s with this, but it still takes my breath away. And it is clearly a point of comparison for a future cityscape. And it's not something we're used to seeing. And then you push into the depths of these places. And what are those smokestacks things? The flaming geysers?
Burn off.
Like,
towers.
Think about how many times you've seen those towers in every dystopian movie. Like,
they're related to oil drilling.
Everything.
What are those called?
Like, they used it in Star Wars, Johnny Mnemonic. I mean, it's like there are so many movies that are like, ooh, I like what they did.
I don't think it's
Runner.
ever quite had the same impact as it did for me with this movie. This place is run by industry and corporations. This is not where I think we initially were going. But I will say, aside from peace, I don't see much in terms of government. I see corporations running things. And would make me think that our police force is working for the corporations, not for any local municipal government or grander. All we know about them is, we got these replicants and they were made illegal, so shoot to kill. Shoot to kill is it. That's the law. Not much of justice.
I think from a standpoint of science fiction, you can look at this world being everything from gangs in the underworld all the way up. Everything is factions. You heard the police chief himself say, "You're either cop or you're little people."
Ugh.
Like that. The police.
It makes me
the
sick.
police. Yeah. The police,
That's
the police in this are, their own piece. Oh, no choice, huh? No choice, pal. And it's gonna be one of those things that there probably is some version of government, but not to get too political right now. What isn't influenced by corporations?
Yeah, and it's also interesting to note that the Tyrell Corporation does not care about the laws that much. I mean, here they are. There's a Blade Runner from the legal system comes into the company, and Tyrell himself puts right in front of him someone he knows is replicant.
That's not supposed to be there.
Basically, that's not supposed to be there, who he is supposed to kill, and in this, incredible power move, just, makes him feel like he can't do anything about it. It's kind of amazing.
That scene, I think about that first. That scene, what I thought about was, and I think this is the answer to the question that I had, which was this Voight-Kampff test that they have. Why created the replicants? Why is he so curious about the test? Why wasn't his in? And it's because he does whatever he wants. He doesn't answer to anyone else. And that is precisely what you want in this type of world, is to be able to do what you want.
I definitely think he's pushing the envelope. Like, the reason that he had Rachel there was, I want to see the best of the best test my best work thus far and tell me whether or not it's a replicant. And I think it's also worth noting that this movie took place in November of last year.
Yeah.
I've always loved that.
Yep.
Like, literally November of last year, I was like walking around. I was like, all right, guys, Blade Runner time. Where are the replicants at?
Somewhere out there, there's a replicant releasing a dove with his dying.
I said, where's my hover cars at? I want, because I would do it as soon.
I'm sorry, I don't want to see hover cars until people can demonstrate that they can drive with autopilot in an intelligent way.
All I know is the first thing that I will do upon owning a hover car is play the soundtrack of this movie while driving.
Well, the first thing I'm going to do is try to barrel roll. That's the first thing I
There's
probably try in any vehicle, honestly. Can I do a barrel roll? And if I can't, who's the person I can find that can? Someone can.
Dear. There is a moment early in this movie where they're flying around and the music swells up and it's kind of beautiful and amazing, and Deckard looks around and has this look on his face like, this is kind of cool and amazing. And I just got to think, like, haven't they seen this before? Your reaction and the music are both implying that this is some new experience that they're having. But clearly, you've had
this guy's a street
before,
dweller,
right?
Like, you have to assume that some people have never left the surface.
In the movie that we see him in,
does his car not fly?
It doesn't fly, but it doesn't mean it can't.
That's true.
Yeah,
he is a wheels on the ground.
Okay. And maybe in his
They're like,
there's a Blade Runner.
Sure.
Board.
Yeah, well, maybe it's just been a while. I mean, he's been enjoying retirement. Like, not the shoot him in the head retirement, but the I get to drink.
Maybe he's reminiscing.
I think it's also worth noting, I realized that one of you had made reference to this earlier. You can, in fact, buy the whiskey glasses that Deckard uses in this movie, but they are obscenely expensive. I have looked into this. It is something I wanted. It is not fiscally responsible to purchase.
Well, what about that shot glass that, like, he balances on his solar plexus?
I'm sure that I feel like that was
you probably don't want that. You want the whiskey glass.
The whiskey glass is nice. I feel like it was a very general shot glass that he had going on for the rest of it.
I have to say it right here, which is, I know that his car either doesn't fly or maybe can't fly, because late in the movie, way later in the movie, for no reason at all, he's just sitting in his car and a flying cop comes through and says, "Hey, what are you doing?" And Harrison Ford's like, I'm a Blade Runner, I'm doing my job, here's my number. And 2 seconds later, the flying cop says, "Oh, okay, you're clear, see you later," and just zip, flies away. And when he flies away, you can see, like, people holding fire extinguishers and just blasting down, and you can see the cables coming from the sky. It is maybe not the best work from the special effects team.
You're either cop or you're little people, man.
Yeah, certainly some awesome and not so awesome car flying effects going on here. But one of the things that I love about almost all of those flying car scenes is they are accompanied by some music that is just as we've referenced before, something that works it into your head. It works its way into your ear and just will not leave. Almost not even the melody, just the feel and the emotional emptiness yet beauty at the same time that this score amazingly evokes. Dustin, we were talking earlier before this started, and you mentioned you had some interesting feelings about this score.
Sure, okay. Yeah, I'll tell you. There were two moments where I thought the score, they were duds. They were like, what on earth? One of them was the first flying car sequence into, it is when Deckard is being flown by Gaff to, this would have been the Corporation Pyramid, on the way to Tyrell to meet the owl and to meet Rachel. And it is the synth piano that, wow, wow, wow. It's just kind of like floating through. You don't know what the melody is because it's just somebody kind of tapping through. And and I wrote down in my notes, this sucks. And then I was listening to the and I love
so
that.
Years ago,
upon my second rewatch, I was
go on.
This rules. I feel at home in this flying cop car, and I'm here with a fedora wearing Edward James Olmos, and it works. It really works.
So when you mentioned that, it took me back in high school. At some point, I was just messing around on a regular old piano in the side of a room at a Pennsylvania Music Educators Association all-state event, and this was with a bunch of other orchestral players, and I was just sort of messing around. I like playing chords on pianos and just sort of letting things hang out in a way that is very similar to this movie. And after about 2 minutes of me doing this other kid came over and chewed me out for playing what he called as sad piano corner, where someone's just sitting on a piano and making vaguely sad sounds and chords that are just kind of random, and for the person playing it's like a cool effect because you're really getting into it and it's the emotions you're feeling, but like for everybody else it's sort of weird and empty feeling. That is like a lot of this movie in a way. So on one hand, this is music that perfectly fits with the themes of this movie that are going on, where humanity is leaving the earth. Humanity is maybe even being left behind by its progeny, its creations. Humanity is holding on to its last vestiges of existence. Of course the score is sad. Of course it's like this when you see these cities that are so just... they've sprawled and built on top of and around old buildings, and now the population is crashing.
This track
and the
is
music
incredible.
just fits it perfectly. And yet, it is also sad.
I really want to quote Doc Holliday from Tombstone right here, where the guy's trying to badger him to play Old Susanna, Camptown Races, and Val Kilmer's Doc Holliday goes, well, this is a nocturne. A which? You know, Frederick effing Chopin.
Uh-oh.
I didn't realize, man, I was much later in life. Dad did not introduce Tombstone to me.
In defense of slow sad piano.
Hey, it's got to have a place somewhere.
Yeah, I mean, it is something that after watching this movie, I cannot do anything but go over to my synth piano, boot it up, plug it into Ableton, and just start messing around for a little while. It's just I can't not do it, or mess around on my French horn and play that theme.
Nathan, for your piano, did you need to have like 8 to 12D batteries? Because if you did, it sounds like a rockin' time.
That's the same number of batteries my Sega handheld.
I don't even know what that was called. Sega. I don't even know. Sega something.
I gotta say the synth piano that this was actually recorded on by the artist Vangelis is a beast. I mean, this is one of those electric keyboards that has more sliders on it than piano keys. Just like a circuit board exploded over an instrument, and I think that the composer just had a real rockin' good time watching scenes, probably drinking some things or otherwise modifying his artistic rendition abilities in other ways. And
Well, I came around really
putting
quickly.
out some
I thought
good tunes.
I was not going to enjoy um, music that was happening, and I was, once again, I'll use the word enthralled by what was given. I was super excited. Let's say super excited. When I was introduced to the places where all of the people came together, where you had Southeast Asia and tunes, percussion, flutes. When he meets Snake Salesman, when he talks to the woman that identifies what the scale is, and she's running that out of her fish shop, like that music felt like this is a mixture of all who's left, and it felt real. On top of like, oh, there's these crazy parking meters, and it's also it's a traffic jam on every street, and there's a man walking around with an eagle on his head, and there's a guy who makes snake genetics the wrong word, artificial snakes. Like, oh, this is a snake scale. Let me show you the guy who makes snakes. Like, this is just part of the world. The music helped with that, and it was I should be forever believing that Evangeles, or however you say his name, wasn't up to the task, because he was.
It's good stuff. And you know what else really sets those different cultures apart is the wardrobe that's happening. And man, this movie is one that has some creative clothing choices all across the board.
No doubt.
I mean, you've got everything from clear plastic ponchos to umbrellas with lights on the handles to the most intense shoulder pauldrons that you could ever see. I mean, you could cut yourself on those. It's amazing.
It's a sexiness I didn't think angularity could ever give me. Oh, you look like an hourglass for real? Okay, yeah, I'm done. Incredible. We're talking about Rachel here, but her whole... Imagine trying to wear that outfit and not stand out. I mean, Deckard sees her immediately. Oh yeah, the woman wearing the fur that's 30 pounds? That's probably Rachel.
Try to blend into this crowd when you are wearing like clothing that sticks out as much as 2 feet away from your body in several
I do think at
directions.
one point I saw a guy walking down the street and he was in basically like Viking furs. And I was like, I mean, multicultural, let's go.
This is the future, the ultimate melting pot. Everyone has come together here, even the Vikings.
But the bar at, what was it, Teffy's? Where the snake show was, the bartender, he's still wearing a tux.
Hey,
Okay, so you remember his name.
is it? No. I'm just saying, I'm just thinking, everybody's got their thing going. Bartender's like, yeah, I'm feeling that, that old school Vegas. That,
bow tie or
James Bond.
Yeah.
It's good to know that if you wanted to be a time traveler, you could take basically, as a guy, one piece of clothing, and it would work for like many hundreds of years, probably. Of different eras to go into.
But the first thing I wanted to say was a top hat, but I don't think it is. Let's go with the Viking horned helmet, which we know is historically accurate. That's the one we should. Tyrell, Dr. Tyrell, with his lavish pyramid bedroom. And when J.F. Sebastian's coming to meet him, he puts on the most, like cotton terry times 1,000, just the huge white robe with his incredible bifocal or trifocal glasses. I thought he had a great look as well. When you had the few chances you had to see him.
I will say that a lot of the Tyrell pieces, his building, his domicile, all those pieces, very, very, very Stargate later on.
Oh, goodness. So, what are you saying? Is the Tyrell Corporation actually go old and there are going to be spaceships landing on those pyramids? Is that how they get off world?
No, I'm just saying that this is another good example of, where people have borrowed from this movie to make their future creations, because they're like, "Oh, I like the cut of his jib. We'll do that."
Yeah, and as you mentioned that, I got to call out the architecture of this movie is just so special. There's the pyramids that have the amazing offset faces to them that are in the art design, the amazing production design, and there are even then the Frank Lloyd Wright wonderful Aztec-looking concrete block house that Deckard lives in, and it's just such a fantastic little scene.
I'm not an architect. Oh, go ahead.
I actually really like Deckard's. I like Deckard's style. I like his house. Like, I very much am in line with what he's got going on.
Well, and then we have to bring up the eye store, the eye market, the completely frozen eye department.
I would assume that because he's working in a close to zero, if not sub-zero environment, that there was probably a product placement here. There's probably an iPad or something at his front desk saying, leave your information for contact on what you actually need, and that his normal customers do not proceed past that into the
cryo room.
vats of this will freeze your arm off when you put it in there. I think he really realized what they were when they proved that they weren't.
Guys, I don't want to embarrass myself on my first hosting job. It's not iTown, it's iWorld. That is the name of his storefront. Still the big.
Look, it wasn't Hey, listen, it wasn't IKEA.
And it wasn't an iPad that they used.
I feel like we need to keep this going.
Well, the iWorld is the one that they discovered right after H-World, and immediately preceding J-World.
Does anybody else have any eye jokes that they want to push in here? Because I feel like we're really hitting this hard, and we just push the boundaries.
Hey, if Apple gets big enough, they will. I mean, think about it. At least one of these off-worlds is that the eye.
I don't think so. Okay. Okay.
That is totally fine. That's very easy to put those together. All right, awesome. Well, enough eye jokes, I think, for the night. Let's move on. I'm pretty sure we should.
Yes.
Well,
yes.
With that out of the way, I think let's move on to some movie superlatives. What do you think about getting into those?
Oh, yeah. Let's do it. Everyone loves this. Let's do it.
All right. Well, let's start with you, Dustin. What or who is the MVP for you for this movie?
I would like to take a moment to say that part of this movie, a bunch of this movie is incredible, but there've been some long-lasting homages. There've been documentaries. There's a very special scene at the end, which is, I think we all could know, it is Rutger Hauer's Tears in Rain speech, which is known and revered among sci-fi fans as being one of the best moments to happen in sci-fi film history. So because of that, I am going to place that on the mantle and say, yes, we know that's great. So I'm going to be shifting every additional superlative that would have been in its place. I'm going to shift it up to the top. So in this case, my MVP would have been Roy Batty, Rutger Hauer, and his acting, specifically his facial responses and short ticks and change in tone. But because I cannot pick him, I'm going to go with my MVP is the actor William Sanderson, who played J.F. Sebastian. Thought he was incredible. I thought his makeup was good. I thought his little world that he lived in by like himself was good. His relationship with Dr. Tyrell was a catalyst for the movie going to where it needed to go. On top of that, you got to see I'll just leave it there. I thought he's incredible. Also, Tennessee boy, born in Memphis, and also he has his Juris Doctorate. He's a lawyer. Well, he never passed the bar, but just one of those little trivia facts for you. So, William Sanderson, MVP.
Great choice, great choice. What about you,
Well,
Brian?
It's important for me, especially with a lot of movies, when we try to go kind of before our time, to really reference why they are important to the future of film. And the reason this movie to me is important, like outside the fact that I love the movie itself, is so many movies spawned off of it, not necessarily as a spawn off as in like the core idea is important, but because they regarded it highly enough to utilize aspects of it to make their movie better. And I'm a huge Fifth Element fan. I'm a big I like the Highlander movies. I understand 99% of it is trash, but it is one of those things where when I, get to reference where they get stuff from, I'm like, oh, it's also this other movie I really enjoy. I'm going to go with Ridley Scott on this. The director, I feel like he really... There's not a soldier out there that didn't have to fight harder for what he wanted from a film. And given the way that this movie was pulled in so many different directions, and I'm not sure what the date was that people actually got to see the cut that he wanted shown. But I mean, this guy really, really went to bat for this film. In the end, he filmed everything. What actually got shown in theaters, on various channels, on DVD, that all came out in oddball directions. But this guy was the instrumental part in making everything that's available. So if out there's a cut that's 9 hours long because he's like, I like what I did, I would watch that 9 hour long Blade Runner. And I know I have the rep of the let's make things I like longer, but I just think that this specifically as a movie, because of the cuts, because of the different variations that have come out, and that there's still the following that has been earnest and loyal throughout the entire process of years and variations.
This is the world of putting
this is it.
Together.
Like this is this guy. This guy did this, and
What an
he's
analysis.
my MVP.
And here I was, not watching cartoons, but getting introduced to Ridley Scott like that.
To be succinct, I'm pretty much following doctrine on this and saying the final cut is the one to watch. There are parts to every variation that I think have merit, but I do think that there are also ones that left some stuff in that you're just like, yikes! Like,
those are
it's more about the story arc that needed to be told and less about I'm not even sure the best way to put this, but the commercialization, which is funny to say because you have a movie about corporations and the story they want told. So maybe it actually all goes into the lore of Blade Runner, that they suffered from a weird reverse hubris of what they're actually telling about in the actual making of the film. So it's I would say the final cut is the one that typically is the one I watch often. That being said, this is definitely one of those movies that I watch on television, and Jess is like, why don't you just watch your DVD? And I'm like, shh.
That'd be crazy. It's on TV right now.
Yeah. So, look, if you have the inclination to enjoy the varying degrees at which this movie has been produced and released, awesome, more power to you. I recommend it just from a film buff standpoint. And if you have not read the book, I highly recommend reading the book, as I always do. But yeah, I'd say Final Cut is my go-to. It's pretty much the factory standard of where you should watch this. But I've got them all, so I get my pick whenever I watch it.
Those are great answers. And you know what, Brian? I totally agree with you. This is the kind of movie that if it was twice as long, I wouldn't complain at all, because this is the sort of movie that there's a plot and there's stuff going on, but as much as that, this is a world that I'm being presented with that I want to live in. And goodness, I just gotta hand it to the art director and production designer, Lawrence G. Paul and David Snyder. They just did fantastic work on this movie in terms of building the incredible complexity of the vision that is this world. Up next is the Best Supporting Actor, Dustin.
Nathan, before you move on from Brian's answer, he mentioned the commercialization. I told you, Nathan, before we started, that I actually took time to count every advertisement, and I found several. I'm going to list them out now. Now, in terms how like screen time or how many times they're presented, that's not what I'm going for. Just the different companies. We have Pan Am, Koss, Cuisinart, Coca-Cola. Johnny Walker is everywhere, especially in Deckard's. I mean, hey, why not, right? Especially in Deckard's apartment. Budweiser and Schlitz, and also Tsingtao. So we have Anheuser-Busch, Schlitz, which I think is Minnesota, maybe Wisconsin, and then Tsingtao, which is Asian. Atari, and then my favorite one of these, before we move on to the next MVP, my favorite one was, there's a sign that has an advertisement for both Bulova, the high-end watch company, and Dentyne, chewing gum.
So just on this note, that not only did I try to find his whiskey glasses, but I was wondering if they actually came out with a Johnny Walker Blade Runner bottle.
Blade Runner.
So yeah, just tiny tangent. My grandfather used to collect antique whiskey bottles and like the collective figurines, and I was like, this will be the start of mine, the Blade Runner whiskey bottle.
Johnny Runner. Johnny Runner.
Fantastic. No, go ahead.
So as I said before, I've slid everything up one slot because I can't afford to deny the limelight that Rutger Hauer had. So best supporting actor, I'm going to go with, it would have been William Sanderson, but we're going to go with the actor who played Leon, who is Brion James. I thought Leon, anytime you saw him, there was a menacing feel for someone who, in fact, maybe the first lines of the movie are traded between Leon and someone else. And I think he's a replicant very early, but his responses are very much, they are almost emotional. It's almost like they programmed Leon to be somehow combative, even if he's following orders. And that was done because Brion James did a great job doing it. Incredible scene with Leon and Deckard in the street. Without intervention from Rachel, Leon would have killed him. I loved the character, and I loved Brian James' portrayal of him. Also, Brian James, if you didn't know him from anything else, one of the like fleet commanders in the Fifth Element, kind of a comedic role for him. I love him, and I thought he did a great job.
I didn't bump all mine up, so William Sanderson is my supporting.
But we share the same,
actor.
we share the same wavelength stuff.
Yeah. But J.F. Sebastian, his piece in this, his, cute naivety when it came to, like, he obviously recognized that they were replicants. He has created his own world within his own, abandoned hotel anyway. He has his own. Let me put it to you this way. I appreciate how well the actors portrayed scientists, because scientists don't fear the way normal people do their creations. So at no point in time did J.F. Sebastian really think his life was in danger with a combat model and Roy being there. And he pegs them out as replicants. Obviously, that makes him a threat to them. So, they could just kill him there. Obviously, they needed him, but still. It's the fascination with their own work. It's a very hubris piece. Same when they go to visit Tyrell. He's seeing them. He's like, oh, you should revel in your greatness. Like he's sitting there thinking, I made you and you are wonderful. And even though you're here in a very human way to try to gain more than 4 years life, which is just a ludicrous idea in terms of longevity. Why would you want to live longer when you've lived so greatly immediately? And then, being surprised and then being killed, because that's the wrong answer. It's not about how greatly they lived. It's the fact that they want to live. And it's that hubris, that idea that they don't understand on that level because they think on a different level.
Well, for my part in this, I took the Best Supporting Actor a little bit literally, and because he's technically not the starring member of the cast, I did put Rutger Hauer on here, just for some of those absolutely incredible moments, the speeches and the face acting that's happening, and the amazing fight scene that happens at the end. So, just incredible. Up next is the Hidden Gem, an underappreciated minor cast or element in this movie. Dustin.
Yeah, we'll start. The hidden gem here for me is Emmett Walsh, the actor, as I'll say Chief Bryant. He's just referred to as Bryant, but I assume he is in some type of administrative role. And I'll read specifically what I said about him. I don't know how they found someone who could so easily embrace being a scumbag cop in a leadership position, but they did. And it's part of what like Ridley Scott said, this is how we need to have this character be portrayed. He's the one that introduces the derogatory term. He's the one that is always kind of pushing Deckard. And he's just a stuffed suit. And he makes you someone you love to hate. Yeah, God. This guy. Yeah. So, that's mine. And Emmett Walsh. Good job as a very small part in terms of acting, but a very huge part in terms of pushing the story forward.
Great. How about you, Brian?
I freaking love Edward James Olmos. I feel like he is the quietest, best role in this entire movie. I think that you could watch this movie 20 times and not get the origami piece. I remember the first time that I watched the director's cut and realizing that the difference between the cut I'd seen before and then the origami piece and the fact that he had made a unicorn And then when they actually
Yep.
spliced in the unicorn cut, I was just like, this is messing with my brain right now. I'm gonna have to like
Changes
really,
the whole
oh
movie.
my gosh. And like Dustin said earlier, I'm gonna bust one of my next superlatives up, but my favorite quote of the movie is, "It's too bad she won't live, but then again, who does?" Like, he gets it, man. This guy is like, I want to know what his rank and position is with the police department, because I almost feel like he's got to be the Blade Runner that was like just quietly backing up Harrison Ford to make sure he didn't screw up. And then also, he was somehow more empathetic, and we'll get into the whole, is Deckard an android too? But I almost feel like he was more empathetic to the situation in the end of everything than Deckard was. So I feel like Olmos' character is, in its very essence, the hidden gem, because there's so much to think about his character.
Yeah, he stands at the edges in a lot of scenes, looking on in a way which, between his wardrobe, which with the cane and everything, he's just such a striking, presence in these scenes. But he looks on in a way that you feel like he knows more than he's letting on, and he's picking up Deckard and doing these tasks, but you feel like he's not serving his higher-ups so much as they're putting the right guy to connect the dots together or something. It's really interesting, and I am right. I'm agreeing with you on that hidden gem with Olmos. Just really, really great seeing him here. And moving on, we love all these actors we've been talking about, so many great parts, but if you had to recast one of them, who would you replace?
It's almost as if the timing is too perfect here. Let me separate what I'm about to say with something else. The first thing I looked at was, I looked up the most popular actresses of the 70s and 80s just to see if there was anybody else who could fit in. And I noticed very few Black or Latina actresses. And I even started looking for Asian actresses, and I realized that's, if one of the replicants was somehow more diverse, or if there was something aside from what we saw, that might be interesting. That's all I'll say there. Who do we recast? Gaff. Gaff sucks. And this is what I'm here to say. I know y'all love Gaff. Gaff sucks. Completely superfluous character. Does not do anything that couldn't be done by someone else. Here's my recast. Edward James Olmos, sure, fine. I've got a mustache. He's got a mustache. I respect that. He wears a fedora. He walks with a cane. He makes origami. I make origami. I know I don't make matchstick men, but this guy is driving me nuts. So this is really a critique on the character. But if we have to change something, it's not going to be Edward James Olmos. It's going to be, at the time, 1982, an 18-year-old John Leguizamo playing a more brash and upbeat version of like a Blade Runner that's like coming into his own and pushing the old guy to be better. Not some, he describes him as a brown noser. Not some brown noser, just like some guy that's really about to like push the limits of what can be done. That I like.
Oh yeah.
Gaff as presented, to me, forgettable, confusing. The character in a movie I'd most like to see removed in my entire life.
Oh, wow.
And guess what? If you want, John Leguizamo can do origami. I also thought about this. Instead of going younger, what if we went older? What if Gaff was George Carlin, who's just like cracking wise the whole time, who's like making jokes about how Deckard sucks and like, oh, I fall in love with a replicant, whatever. Like, just literally anything to make Gaff matter to me. You guys gave great points as to why, oh, maybe he's the man for the job, this, that, and the other, and I was just like rolling my eyes so hard they fell down the stairs. Gaff to me sucks, and I will never like him. And that's my, if you recast it into something more exciting, then maybe I'm down. But for right now, that's my answer.
I would say in a defense of that point, I think the whole point in his character was the subtlety that the captain didn't know if Deckard still had the juice, and Gaff's initial position going to get him and everything was of lethargy. Like, he's like, why am I doing this? I can do this job. This guy wants him instead. I don't like it. That's the reason Gaff keeps letting him get his ass kicked before he intervenes, because he doesn't care anything for Deckard outside of the fact that he sees the one entry position where Deckard gives a shit. And then he's like, all right, this guy is worthy of my respect. I've seen what he's able to do. Perhaps I was wrong. And then gives a pass at the end.
I really like subscribing to what you just said. But I won't do it because Gaff sucks. And forever, now you and me, Brian, will have this as the thing.
Okay.
Nope. This is what we didn't agree
as
on.
long as you don't as long as you don't attack the new Battlestar Galactica, we're good.
Edward James almost, more like Edward James too late.
Yeah, and that is the other reason why Almost stands out to me, because he's going to be captaining.
And we talked about
man.
Battlestar
Yep.
Galactica before the show, but like, it is nothing against the actor, which is why I chose to recast it, because it's about the character, the way that he was presented. And actually, the quote he presented, I wrote down as one of the ones I would want to say. I think it's a great quote, but you know, if you ask me to make an origami goldfish, I can get one knocked out in 2 minutes. So,
Well, hot take there.
So
what about you?
You know, I had a hard time with this. Obviously, with the love I have for this movie, I don't really want to recast anything. And it's funny because of, you know, the whole epiphany from the beginning of the show. I was thinking of Kevin Conway playing Brian James's character. And I used to think that I had a weird spelling of Brian, but then I saw him and I was like, okay, maybe I should stop complaining.
Brion.
Yeah. So anyway, Kevin Conway actually plays the sergeant in Gettysburg. He is Joshua Lawrence Chamberlain's sergeant who takes a hit. Anyway, I like him as a rough and tumble scrapper. And that is what Brian James's character was. So I was just trying to think of people in that ballpark age range that I also like, that if I'm going to change somebody out, there are so many characters you can't touch in this. And I was like, okay, well, let's go with the muscle. And, you know, the muscle is typically interchangeable. I wouldn't choose to change anybody in this. But yeah, I was thinking, what if you had him like just this, like, you know, kind of rough and tumble Irish gentleman that they chose to mold this this replicant after, and that might be fun.
It would have been fun. Yeah.
Yeah, that sounds like a lot of fun. And for my pick, adding a little bit of extra fun is actually what I was kind of thinking on here, because I feel like this movie has a lot of characters who are often weird in a way, but it's always very understated, very subtle. They're always cast as very serious, very focused, single-minded people. But what if there was someone who gave a little bit more of that sort of human flavor into things, or at least, you know, pushing some of the comedic boundaries a little bit? What if we had a Jeff Goldblum in here, for example, introducing the plot to Decker as Bryant, the captain, in that whole introduction scene. That for me is a little bit of a weak link in this movie. The introduction of the plot and what Decker is doing, I felt like it's very interesting and there's a lot of world building information in it. But I would love to have a little bit more energy and explaining a little bit of how the replicants are doing this. It would be
Yeah,
great.
I see what you're doing. That would be great. But then you'd like that character because it's Goldblum, and I don't think you're supposed to like that character. But that's a good one.
The little people.
Life finds a way.
I never would have.
All right. Well, in a movie where every single frame is amazing, can you figure out what a single best shot is?
I chose mine because of a combination of things, but I'll just go ahead and lay it out. I think there were several best shots, but the one I like the best that kind of represents where they were at the time was when replicant Zora is gunned down by Deckard running through the panes of glass. That you take a shot through the lung. That those guns are high impact. You see him miss a shot and there's an explosion. So this snake charmer woman is busting through the city and is breaking through. There's all neon around and it's all very modern Japanese in terms of brightness in the middle of a cold, dark, rainy day or night. And you see her bust down these glass. She gets shot and then she gets back up and he has to shoot her again. By the way, he's a pretty good shot as far as most action movies go. He hits most of his shots. So it took two to take her down. And the slow motion of it, and the lights, and the end of what I would consider that shot is her body falling down, and it pans up real quick, and you see Leon witness her death. So it was meaningful to the group of replicants. That's my shot. Is that slow mo, what's the word? Retirement of Zora. That's what I like.
Excellent.
Excellent choice. Just incredibly striking. Also from the
you
wardrobe
mentioned
department
that,
there, from with the with the poncho. How about you, how about you, Brian?
I like
What is
the
your favorite
front-on shot of the police cruiser taking him to the police station in the very beginning of this movie. Now, I understand this is from a still frame directive, just like one picturesque piece, but it really is that whole hover scene as it comes into focus, going to the music adds that piece. Like that's a hallmark of Blade Runner for me.
Absolutely. And what I'm going to pick is actually very close to that. Basically another part of that scene, which, I mean, that whole flight is just amazing as they're flying through the city. But there's a shot that's looking down on this huge cylindrical building that is covered in wiring and greebling and plumbing and who knows all what. And below, the city streets are illuminated. And you see this tiny little cop car flying through the air over it. And it's just, wow! The depth in this shot is crazy.
Your wow kind of sounded like a sci-fi engine kind of revving down, like engine braking. Wow, 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 wow.
Maybe I should be a Foley artist.
Yeah, make the sound of an apple by biting into an onion. Yeah, that's fun. It would be a fun job.
It'd be a fun job. I always think that's a hilarious job. All right, well, best shots bleeding into best
so many
scenes. Dustin,
it's like,
what is your best full scene?
it's unfair, man. It's
I think we
unfair
might
to
know.
talk about the best scene when it's Let me give a little preamble I didn't plan. There's a movie called The Great Gatsby with
Is there?
Leonardo DiCaprio, which is which a whole bunch of scenes that are just smushed together, and none of them are great, and it's just a big smush of bright lights, and I don't like it. This is a movie full of dark scenes and bright lights and ostriches being walked through the street and an Egyptian snake there, and a whole bunch of stuff that's just incredible. The best scene is Tears and Rain. It is that monologue that he gives is something that is worth watching over and over and over. And that's the culmination of a scene, you could say. Like, that's a moment. It's a culmination of the cat and mouse chase scene, which is just incredibly thrilling, and it gives you anxiety for. I don't even think Harrison Ford has a line. He just is running from a superior predator. And that scene, there are scenes that I will rewatch over and over if I pull it up on YouTube at any time. Last Samurai, when the first time the samurai come through the fog-filled forest, and the Japanese army is just afraid of them. Agent Smith versus Neo, the first time in the subway. The space battle over the moon of Endor. You gotta watch it. You gotta watch it. And if I saw Ray Batty, Ray or Roy? I think it's Ray.
Right.
Pretty sure it's Ray. No. Okay, so Roy Batty, chasing a scared out of his mind Deckard. It is it's just an incredible scene, and it ends with there's not enough. I don't even. It's like what when Frye was trying to do his recap. You almost don't want to talk about it. So we'll just say, hey, all you listeners of the roundtable, watch that scene, Tears and Rain. And if you have the time, watch what happens before it, because it's just incredible. That's my.
It is a really neat scene, and I do want to hold here because I think it's so integral to this movie, because the replicants that Deckard is hunting behave in a really weird way toward the end, where they have so many opportunities to just kill him and they don't, and it seems like they're trying to accomplish something else and imply that maybe they're trying to get some idea across, that, so Deckard is totally terrified that whole scene, but it's kind of interesting to me that at the very end, Roy gives him some idea of, like, there's no point in me actually finally killing you, because I'm trying to leave a mark on this world, and I'm going to give you some knowledge by fighting you in this terrifying way, and set you down with this experience about what this world and the Tyrell Corporation and these regulations have done to us are just so terrible. It's just a really fascinating.
Literally, the song "More Human Than Human" by Rob Zombie was made off of the Tyrell Corporation's. Their logo about being more human than human. So it's like this was literally like they are showing the compassion piece, trying to change minds that were not just unsentient beings that are slaves. And yeah.
Oh, yeah. Well, we didn't actually get to what your best scene was, Frye.
So my best scene is Pris dying when he shoots her doing the acrobatic moves. There is not there's not a scene in a movie that still freaks me out like that scene. Like, even rewatching it for this podcast, and I've seen this movie so many times, that scene where she gets shot and just starts freaking out, like, that still freaks me out. Like,
good call.
It is probably the scene that resonates more from the first time I saw it, because I remember being like, oh my God, look at this. And he shoots her again and she's still doing it. It's like, the same way that, Kurt Russell in The Thing, like it's still going. It's still going. Like, I remember that.
Yeah.
Like,
Yeah.
oh, like this isn't a horror movie. But that scene still freaks me out. It's probably the only Genesis scene I have from, not really remembering the first time I watched it, but I remembered that.
Yeah, it stuck with you for so long.
Yeah, just visceral in a way that's just
Yeah.
incredibly and her scream, the screech as she's attacking. It's like
And
that is a lot of books describe
and she
screams
could have
as
killed him.
blood-curdling.
She could have
That
killed him,
is
but she didn't.
blood-curdling.
Now she might have. In the end, she might have, but you'll
Absolutely.
never
She
know
had-
that she had him, and so yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean we've just seen a scene of Roy the mountaining Tyrell, so we know that they're into crushing heads, and she gets very close to that. It is disturbing and riveting and visceral in a crazy way. And that previous scene is actually what I'm going to bring up as my note for best scene in this movie, in which the scene where Roy Batty comes in and demands from Tyrell, you need to give us more life. And Tyrell spins this crazy excuse for why he can't do that. First, he starts on some sort of technical issue where he's trying to pretend like, oh, we can't do it at all. We can't do it at all. Obviously, that doesn't work, and Batty doesn't believe it for 1 second. Of course not. They could make them live longer. So then he moves over to the regulations. Well, the government won't let us do that. You can't live any longer. And again, Batty's, that's totally ridiculous. I mean, JS is right in the room with them, and this guy is making replicant toys all over the place. And we know that Tyrell is experimenting on Earth with them. So obviously, that's not true either. And so finally, he gives this crazy quote that is just utterly insane. The light that burns twice as bright burns for half as long, and you have burned so very, very brightly, Roy. It is...
I love that.
Everything about that.
I know how crazy it is, and I just love it.
Crazy in the way that you think about how this corporation treats the rest of the world. Yeah, and their worldview. We control you. We allow you to do this, and you should thank us for every second of your life and your extra strength. And for that reason, because of what we've given you, you don't deserve to live any longer. And by the end of that scene, it's like, yep, crush his head in. This is what needs to happen.
Another example of
it's pretty amazing.
Rutger Hauer kind of looks like a Lost Boys Dracula in this moment when his sorry, I have a habit of calling vampires Draculas for stupid dummy effect, but he looks incredible and the lighting's so good, and his facial features, there's almost a hint of like regret that what he's doing, that he shouldn't be doing what he's doing, but he's got himself on this path. Most regrettable afterwards is that, did you have to kill Sebastian? Did you have to kill JF Sebastian? I guess, but man, he was just such a fan favorite for me that I didn't want that to happen for him.
I tend to think that the reason that happened was because that's not the audience that needed the mercy. Like, there's a calculation that still happens within, I'm going to say, quote unquote, machines. And when mercy happened, it was against someone who had no mercy toward him, not to the ones who were, frankly, on their side.
Oh, cool. That is cool. Yeah,
That's interesting.
yeah. It's good to be on a podcast with a number one fan of a movie.
Yeah, it's
I have watched this once or twice.
yeah. Yeah, yeah. I mean, just incredible hubris from the Tyrell Corporation for that. Yeah. So, and we move on from piece to piece to piece, where this movie has just in spades things to choose from. And here's another one: best wardrobe and makeup. Dustin, what would you pick?
Not gonna choose Rachel's wardrobe, because it's clearly an iconic thing throughout the entire movie. So I'm gonna give my second best option, which is Daryl Hannah. When you first see her, she is walking down the street in a, I guess I would have assumed a wig, but that might be her actual hair. And she snuggles up in some trash like homeless people sometimes do, and she's there on a mission. Now, rewatching this movie, I didn't pick up on the mission right away. I picked up on just how is this going to play out. But I think the eccentricity of her outfits, her makeup, and her hair really work. And I guess what I can say is maybe I'm being biased because she's interacting the most with my favorite character, J.F. Sebastian. Maybe that's why I'm paying more attention to her. But I will also say that her dark makeup, the airbrushed makeup on the black line across her eyes, makes it to where the pupil, like not dilation, but whatever that specific effect they do with the eyes, really stands out on her when they're in the toy shop before the manipulation scene. Like you can see that brightness in her pupils so well, it almost looked digital. And I don't know if it was, but it looked great. So that's my answer. Daryl Hannah's wardrobe and
that's
eyes.
Actually a really interesting effect that they did in fact have. It's similar to sort of the red eye effect of photography, where you're just getting a bad reflection from something, but all these actors are staring at a light the whole time because they want to have that weird reflection in coming out of their eyes, and it is creepy.
Yeah.
Creepy. Yeah.
It works too,
Yeah.
because it seems so natural. Yeah. Anyway,
Ryan,
that's mine.
how about you?
I'm a
Favorite
huge
wardrobe?
Firefly fan, and wish that more had come of that series. But I can't help but draw parallels to Deckard's wardrobe to that of Captain Malcolm Reynolds. It's always
Oh my
been a
gosh,
piece
you're
for
right.
me where I juxtapositions and whatnot, but I've always liked his style, and it carried over. I've tried to make a point of where this movie has taken other movies and other TV shows. But I would say that that's probably the avenue I would take wardrobe in this is where that went.
Great choice. That's a really interesting connection I hadn't thought about, but just works perfectly.
Well, Deckard's wardrobe is worth remarking on. It's worth remarking on. It is. He's not superhero. He's man who is in a job, an ex job. He's brought back.
Yeah.
I love.
So like you, Dustin, I think that there are certain wardrobe moments in this movie that are just absolutely iconic and which I could call out, but I feel like I want to bring up one that to me is something that comes out of this movie as just incredibly striking. This is another contender for favorite shot in the movie, but very early on, they're at street level and people are walking around with these umbrellas that have light sticks as the handle poles. And it's just such a visually arresting thing in this scene shot in the rain that's pouring down and around, and there's all these really beautiful lights. It's like this environment that you're living in is horrifyingly ugly, but you're coming up with these kind of beautiful, timeless images within that, and it's kind of awesome. So that's what I'm going to call out here. is I want that prop. That's the prop.
It is
that I
awesome.
want out
I
of
think
this
beauty is in the eye of the beholder at this point. You have a lot of instances where, you grow up in a certain location, you find beauty where you can. If you grow up in a dystopian future where everything's, maybe a little crappy, then you find beauty in the locales and whatever you can. It's such a weird thing to talk about beauty because there's such a diverse range of preferences that go to that. And I think that what this movie is really trying to put forth is we all have the right, or at least should have the right and opportunity to find those beauties where we can. And one of the things that really struck me, probably the third or fourth watch, I didn't care about the romance aspect of this as a younger guy. I didn't really. Some of the nuances of this just weren't as important, like Dustin was talking about. Like you get deep, you get deeper levels.
Like Gaff.
The more and more
Not
you
that
watch
important.
it. And this is another thing I like about this movie is sometimes I find something that I didn't notice the other 50 times I've watched it. So it's nice to have, the retrospect, but the whole thing between, he and Rachel is not just from a 2049 perspective, which if you haven't seen it, please watch that movie. But he is initially completely unwilling to hear any basically propaganda that they put in her head, to the point where he turns the other cheek and says, you know what? Who am I to judge what you deem real? Because if you look at everything else out there right now, who am I to judge what you find is real or what you hold sacred? So, in the end, does it matter? Do you dream electric sheep?
In the end, did Deckard succeed at what he was supposed to do? He did put down a bunch of replicants, but the replicants succeeded in their mission.
Hashtag watch 2049.
Yeah, I mean.
Yeah, in a movie that really asks the question. Also, these memories are coming from Tyrell's nieces, Deckard says, and you got to ask, like, if these people have these memories, they almost have a right to all of the things that come with it, because they are made into that person in just so many ways. It's really interesting.
It's a deep movie. It really is a deep movie.
One of many just incredibly fascinating things. Next on our list is the change one thing, but before I do that, it occurs to me, what is can I throw a wild card out here? We're talking about themes.
Wild card, yeah.
Brian, would you say that is your favorite theme?
I think
or idea
that
in this movie?
it's not about a favorite theme. I think it's about the primary theme is, what does it mean to be human? Because you can go on Netflix and watch documentaries about serial killers, and they'll complain or proclaim, this is inhuman. They'll use the word inhuman, and that's an actual human. Here you have a replicant that is easily capable of ending human life, but in the end chooses to save it in the hope that the message gets across that he is indeed something worthy to be called human. So I would say that in the end, it's an introspective piece on what is it worth to really call yourself that?
Yeah, yeah. I think that's a really well explored theme that this movie achieves in a really, really amazing way. Dustin, I know this is a bit of a wild card random question, but is there something else that pops out to you as a way that you would sort of summarize how this movie works, or the best sort of deep discussion point that this brings up to you?
Pass. No, I'm totally kidding.
All right.
Of course not. Of course I'm not.
Yeah, I'm sorry to spring
No.
this out, because this is a movie that when I watched again, and also connecting probably because of sort of things that I'm thinking about with other science fiction franchises that I've seen, is, there's a lot of science fiction franchises that ask, what does it mean to be human? When we make robots, at what point do they become human? But one of the things that I realized that this movie is doing at the same time, it's exploring what does it mean to be human while humanity is essentially giving birth to the next species, and moving out to the stars. What does it mean to be sort of left behind on this earth that is sort of the last vestige of what's left of the earth with this? It's really interesting.
Let me tell you what stood out to me in the movie. There are some archaic things. In fact, aside from the slavery aspect, do you know what it is to live in fear? Aside from the slavery aspect, I won't. That's not what I'm going to get at. JF says, JF Sebastian says to Pris when he's welcoming inside his home. I've got plenty to eat inside. For the record, true Tennessean, so that's not a fake accent, which is a huge bonus for me. That's not a fake Southern accent. One of the worst things that could ruin a movie. He says something along the lines of, "Yeah, there's plenty of space here. There's no reason for people not to have a home," and that is something that is poignant to me, because there is plenty of space, and there is in this world of Blade Runner space for people to live, even if it is a decrepit hotel that is falling apart because of the rain. There's plenty to go around, and Deckard asks for 4 pieces of sushi, but he only gets 2, and there are two and two. And for the record, Frye, that that sushi salesman knows what he's saying, pretending not to. So the idea of there's always enough to go around is something that really matters to me, and even in a world like this, it's still true. So if somebody wanted to follow up on that's just something that I feel like is, you don't have to go to space. Once people vacate, there's space for you. We can.
I'm sure that everybody who has
I like the phrase "we can make
has some key in point where they're like, "Yay, I'm watching this movie." And for me, in this movie, it's when he goes, "They say you are Blade Runner," and I'm like, "Yes, he is." It's one of those Mortal Kombat. It has begun.
This is
so. Just maybe
Yes.
not the best for a best quote, but it's a set off point where I'm like, oh, I can't wait till he's like, "They say you're a Blade Runner," and because he is.
Yes. Yeah. Man, this is why this is such a great movie, because there are so many different conversations and themes to have out of what this goes on, which is why I wanted to ask this. Because the thing that I've noticed in sort of the last watch through is all these points that are a little bit weird, because on one hand, it's about what it is for the replicants and their struggle and their need to be recognized as true individuals who are human or more potentially in terms of their emotional individual capacity. But it's also interesting, like we're talking about with what happens to humanity and what does that mean as they're starting to almost fade away. I mean, this is a story where people are leaving the Earth, going out to the stars, but also replicants are probably very, high in number out there in a way. So that's one thing. And it's also interestingly telling to me that the Tyrell Corporation passes along some very specific memories to the replicants. There's the obviously fantasy sort of memory of the unicorn that Deckard has. There's this scary story of the spider story that Rachel retells, which is a crazy story to think about, where the Tyrell Corporation is realizing its place. It is the mother spider in a way. It has spun its crazy web and is in control of everything. And now it's realizing that its progeny, its replicants, could consume it later. And that, it seems really telling to me that that is something that they pass along to the replicants. So while there are plenty of people, there's plenty of space to go around, but humanity is refusing to admit that things are moving on. Their progeny are growing up, and they should, and they need to deal with it. So just a movie full of interesting themes. So I thought I would bring that up for this. But let's move on to one more item. Change one thing. Dustin, what would you change?
Oh, I don't know if this is going to be a surprise to anyone, but let's get rid of Gaff. No, I'm sorry. There's actually two real answers here. First one is the scroll at the beginning. Do we need it?
That's a good question.
I don't think so. I think there's plenty of in-movie time to have that work. The scroll is great.
Well, it was a product
Wars.
of its time. There were several movies.
And it's not even needed for Star Wars.
I agree with you. I think it's something that could easily be left off of this movie, but it was something that in the early to mid 80s was heavily utilized for, frankly, laziness.
Exposition, laziness. Yeah. So, and then that's one thing. The second thing, and I think this is better, because both of mine were just like, get rid of something. This one I like. We learned from Bryant that 6 replicants attacked the Tyrell Corporation. One of them gets burnt up in an electric field. One of them gets captured or something. Show that in some capacity, whether it's just a 2-minute clip of like these incredibly versatile hunter/warriors attack a building, or just have those be flashbacks in some way. Because we loved seeing how the replicants showed emotion when they lost a comrade or when they were afraid. And so I think if we could add in something along the lines of what Bryant described as that initial attack, I don't want to see them slaughtering 23 civilians on a shuttle. I want to see them attacking Tyrell Corporation. That I think could be very cool.
Hey, can I connect the dots on some of those? What if the opening scene of this movie was the raid on the Tyrell Corporation? We're introduced to our villains early. Maybe they have some expositional dialogue that explains why they're doing it. Like they're psyching each other up to go. They oppressed us. They took away our right to live. Storm the gates. And then they fail. Some of them die.
Yes.
Cut away.
Yes. That could work. And I've thought about that same thing. So that's my answer. I know that, clearly the best answer in the world would be to get rid of Gaff, but my answer for the show is show like how that attack went.
So I've already spoken to obviously my love of this movie. I also just want to earmark this because it is something that's out there about talking about Blade Runner and Alien being in the same universe. I seriously spent like a hot minute being like, yes, 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 it should. And then Alien versus Predator came out, and I was like, nope, nope, no, no, distance yourself, distance yourself, distance yourself. So, I'm not opposed to it happening, but I'll pretty much need Denis Villeneuve to do it. Like, the only reason that I really gave a basically meaningless nod to him redoing Dune, because who cares what I think, uh, uh, was the fact that he did such a good job with Blade Runner 2049. I was like, okay, this guy might get it. Let's go. I'm on board. And I'm not opposed to Blade Runner and Alien having some sort of crossover. I think that's frankly intriguing. But man, mistakes have been made, and I have fear.
And you want to see it happen the best way, yeah.
If you brought in, ooh, yeah, I feel like that's one of these with Denis Villeneuve. He's not going to make a movie that's just a popcorn action alien
No,
movie.
he won't.
Crossing with Blade Runner. I feel like he would be someone I would trust, because I agree, the Blade Runner 2049 is a movie that gives me trust in the Dune movie to be good.
Or Arrival. I mean, he like, if he does a movie,
yeah,
I'm I'm behind you. Like, I'm backing that.
yeah.
I think I pronounce his last name differently every time I say it, so just bear with me.
Yeah. Likewise. I think what would that? Because the question is, what is the main benefit concept that you can see there? Because you have killing machines made by humans in these like Nexus 6s, right? Meeting with killing machines made by aliens in Alien. And what is the concept, the high concept?
But the
threads that.
And not to get too far off topic here, but the connecting feature of the Alien movies, and one of the few things that stand up, are the artificial life forms, which also, whether good or bad, words. Whether they both show good and bad instincts. So, whether it's the first Alien or, later on with Bishop, like, you have ones that are capable of being more evil, ones capable of being good. So it's like, I'm into where they could take it if they take it there the right way. Because if they destroy it, it's just going to hurt my soul, and I'm just going to curl up in my Dune was a 2-off movie and no one else touch it. And I hate you.
Yeah. I'm going to join you on a somewhat similar note. There's all these, there's so many references to off-world in this movie, and I really am curious what the structure is with replicants off-world. Because they talk about, we've created these perfect servants that they are the reason that we're able to explore off-world. They are the workforce on which we build things. And 2049 underlines that. Man, I want to see what that really means. What, I'm going to get to my favorite quote later, but man, I want to see some of these amazing things.
Oh, I wonder what your favorite quote is.
Orion being described here.
Right.
Well, I mean, I'm thinking of like,
what could
I don't know if they like seeing a bunch of replicants working on a spaceship outside of a ship, or seeing a bunch of replicants that are working on a high heat or a high cold type of situation. That could be 30 seconds to show you, this is what they do.
Yeah.
This is what they've been doing, but it's in slavery.
And who knows, maybe there are more varieties of replicants than we've seen, and some of them are really intended for being in space versus just incredibly resistant to
Yeah.
high heat and extreme cold, like we see in this movie. Well, Dustin,
Yeah, that's me.
I've alluded to it just now, but
Best
what
quote, you
is
think?
your favorite quote, or what is the best quote to you in this movie? All right, Dustin, to you, what is the best quote of this movie?
Wrote a whole bunch of quotes. I like good quotes. I'm gonna go with the one that was like, it reminded me of as we mentioned before the show, the film noir aspect. Deckard has a newspaper, and when he's got his newspaper, he's almost camouflaged, like he can get anywhere. The way I thought of it was sort of like Solid Snake with his cardboard box. He can get anywhere with his newspaper, and then that's when he starts his internal monologue. And so my favorite quote that reminded me of him just like struggling with himself, like another dame walked in the office like a private eye, is this quote. I'm going to do my Harrison Ford impression. Replicants were not supposed to have feelings. Neither were Blade Runners. What the hell was happening to me? And that's my favorite quote. Where he's actually asking himself, well, good gracious, what's going on? and I liked it because it did create a dichotomy of there are Blade Runners and replicants, and they're supposed to be like opposites of each other, and one's the hunter, one's the hunted. But it was just something we hadn't really talked about, is his internal monologue throughout the show, and so I decided I'd pick that quote as the one that was my favorite.
Yeah. Well, Brian, how about you?
I already ruined mine, but it's Gaff's. It's too bad she won't live. But then again, who does? I think anybody who's ever worked and had a trying day in their job hasn't thought something similar to this. So I feel like that's very telling. It's like, dude, do you not have a day where you're just like, is this really what it is? Like, if this is really all it is, all right.
Am I just waiting until I can fall asleep? Yeah.
This is just a short anecdote. I was at work the other day and heard a couple people talking and literally listened. I had to. I mean, they were standing right next to me. They ignore you as a person because you work there. Had just the most inane conversation I've ever heard in my life. I think a small hole in the atmosphere opened up because of the exhaust of this conversation. And so when you hear Gaff say this, you're just like, yeah, that's that's accurate.
I get you, Gaff.
So, oh God, yeah, that.
Well, my favorite quote is the one that just pulls me to the stars, and I just think it's so beautiful, so beautifully delivered, so beautifully shot, just amazing. Right at the end of the movie, Roy Batty, just as he knows he's about to die, passes some knowledge onto the Blade Runner he knows has been forced to tail him. Attack ships off the shoulder of Orion. I watched sea beams glitter in the dark near Tannhauser Gate. All those moments will be lost in time, like tears in rain. Time to die.
It's so good. It's so good.
That is a moment.
Forever. Rest in peace. Hey, rest in peace, Rutger Hauer.
Absolutely.
And Brian James.
Yeah, true.
Amazing work. Amazing work. Well, that brings us to the end of our superlatives. And while technically we don't have a guest on this, since Dustin is now officially a host among us.
Yeah, we don't have a Russell guest on this.
We'll still give, huh?
Last name joke.
Super cool last name joke.
I always wonder about that. Not in podcast, obviously, for this discussion, but
his name is Russell Guest. My name is now Dustin
people
Host.
Make guest jokes all the time around him or something.
You want a rating from me? I'll give you a rating.
I was gonna ask if you had a plug.
Whoa, I actually do have a plug. It's just for a podcast that I really like, and it's kind of a strange place to put it at the end of a sci-fi podcast, but yeah, this podcast I really like is called Off Book, the improvised musical podcast with Jess McKenna and Zach Reno. I think they're out of Earwolf, but I really like that. Maybe some of you sci-fi heads like improvised show tunes as well.
Sounds good. All right. Well, now that we've finished off with our movie superlatives, it's time to move on to our ratings. We rate on a series on a scale of 0 to 5 stars in half-star increments. I'm not sure if any of us are going to have to use that half-star increment in this particular review, but Dustin.
Ooh, yeah. Oh, we're switching up the order for the last category. You go Brian first.
Why did my brain do that? I don't
know.
Probably because I was thinking about how this is Brian's favorite movie. But anyway, Dustin, what is your rating for Blade Runner?
I have a cheeky answer that I'm actually going to skip. This is 4.5 stars for me. This is incredibly high. When it comes to survey methodology and ranking systems, I am really skeptical of 0s and 5s. This is as high of a score that I think I can give. I've mentioned that I don't like Gaff, and I also mentioned, well, you know what? I did not mention the scene that is actually keeping it from the 5, which is a scene that if you've watched the movie, you know, and it is completely something that in today's day and age would never be filmed.
Would not fly. I know.
And we all know where we're talking about it, so that's why it's a 4.5 out of 5. But this is essentially the highest ranking I can give. I mean, I might give The Fifth Element a 5, but there are some movies that I might give a 5. But this is so good, and it enthralled me in a way. 4.5, incredible movie.
Well, Brian, what do you have?
I want to take a Billy Bob moment from Varsity Blues and be like, Tan! But I won't continue that quote. But no, this is a 5 for me. Like I said, like I haven't seen a movie better than this. I don't think. And look, I'll agree with him too. Like Fifth Element, like I have movies that I truly love. I really do. And they're important to me in a variety of ways. But this is one of the few blendings where I'm like, okay, I love this movie. I think that there should have been a critical reception to this movie equivalent to that love. And I think that the longevity and even though the initial critical, relevancy, which I wasn't even alive for, that doesn't mean anything to me because I got the after effects. I got to hear what the world thought of it after people really had a chance to digest how good this movie was. So yeah, I mean, I give it a 5. I think it's well deserving of all the accolades it's gotten over time. And this is one of those movies that I will enjoy introducing to my daughter when she is not as young as Dustin.
not 11.
This is gonna blow your mind.
Probably not.
And she's like,
it would.
You're not gonna. How about VeggieTales?
Gotta ramp up the sci-fi slowly to meet that phase. There's plenty of sci-fi you can bring in earlier than that. Yeah.
Peppa Pig goes to space.
I feel like I am going to cause some extreme raised eyebrows here when I say I have not seen The Fifth Element. We should do that sometime on this podcast because I haven't seen that movie, and I feel like as someone who loves sci-fi and who thinks that he has a fair amount of sci-fi knowledge and cred on that side, that is a big hole in my experience. But I'm gonna join you, Brian, on that 5 stars. This is a movie that you could live in, and the texture is just amazing. The amount of love and care that was shoved into every corner of this movie is just something that I think is pretty amazing. Well,
did my score prevent this movie from getting into some type of Ring of Honor? Because if it did, I'm sorry, but
no. We're actually we'll do it end of the year, and they'll factor everything in together. So
good.
I would be shocked if anything gets any higher than this. This is a pretty special movie, and I, like you, Dustin, consider the 5-star something that I will not give out lightly.
Same.
There are very few movies I would ever give 5 stars, and this is one of them. Well,
I was lucky to be a part of it then.
And the one dissenting justice spreading.
this Gaff guy, I don't even understand. 20 pages on his wardrobe.
On Gaff. ...
I can do origami. On Gaff.
All right. Well, this has been a great review of this movie, Blade Runner, but we gotta make a selection for the movie for next time. We have 3 options here. Option 1 is Encino Man from 1992. When they find a frozen caveman in their backyard, 2 high school outcasts thaw him and introduce him to modern life, while he in turn gets them to actually enjoy life. Option 2, Dogma from 1999. An abortion clinic worker with a special heritage is called upon to save the existence of humanity from being negated by 2 renegade angels trying to exploit a loophole and re-enter heaven. Or is it option 3, Get Shorty from 1995? A mobster travels to Hollywood to collect a debt and discovers that the movie business is much the same as his current job. Brian, what are we going to look at?
So I think next week we should go with Get Shorty.
All right. Well, mobster movies collecting debt. Very, very exciting. Looking forward to doing that.
Yeah, me too. I'll be there to help with Get Shorty. Good choice.
Yep. Yeah. All right. Well, thank you, Justin, so much for joining us today and for podcasts in the future. We are excited to have you and look forward to watching more movies with you.
Oh, yeah.
So, remember, all the lords, ladies, and knights of the Retro Movie Roundtable, we invite you to reach out to us. We want to hear from you. Subscribe, rate, and review us on iTunes, Spotify, Stitcher, Google Play, YouTube, or wherever you get your podcasts. Give us a like on Facebook, follow us on Twitter at movie_retro, or email us at retromovieroundtable@yahoo.com. Producing and providing this podcast is fun but not free. We invite you to support the show at our Patreon page at www.patreon.com/retromovieroundtable. Any contribution is much appreciated, and we will go towards making the show better for you, our listeners. As always, thank you for listening. Be good to each other, and watch more movies. Brian?
Just as individuals are born, mature, breed, and die, so do societies, civilizations, and governments.